It started with a tremble. Not loud, not dramatic, not the kind of thing you'd catch on the nightly news. But if you were sitting inside courtroom 3 that afternoon, you'd know. You'd feel it in your gut. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, the spare, the son of Diana, didn't fall to the floor in some cinematic faint. No, what happened was quieter than that. Slower, more devastating. His shoulders dropped. His lips parted, as if to speak, but finding no sound. And for a brief moment, the heir who had been trying to become something more, a truth-teller, a whistleblower, a man finally free from the palace machine, looked very much like someone who'd just had the air pulled from his lungs. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And he had, because the judge had just said the words no royal, no public figure, no man raised in privilege ever expects to hear. This court refers the matter of possible perjury to the Crown Prosecution Service for review. A pin could have dropped. It would have sounded like a thunderclap. Now, let's back up for a second. Because this isn't just another celebrity court drama. It's not about headlines. It's not even just about Harry. It's about what happens when the story you've spent years telling, the one that redefined your image, reshaped your marriage, and restructured your war against the press, begins to collapse. In real time under oath. And the world is watching. Why now? Why does this matter? Because we've reached a moment where the lines between personal truth and legal truth are no longer blurred. They're under the microscope. And for the first time in modern history, a senior British royal may face criminal investigation, not for what he believes, not for what he claims to have endured, but for what he may have knowingly misrepresented to a court of law. This case was supposed to be Harry's triumph, his vindication, his final strike against the media empire he's accused of tormenting his wife, dismantling his relationships, and, in his words, driving him to the edge. Instead, it may become the moment that undoes everything. And yet, even now, the full story hasn't been told. The headlines have moved fast, some too fast. Harry lied, they shouted. Courtroom chaos, they screamed. But those snapshots? They missed the slow burn, the nuance, the weight. Because buried in the transcripts, in the judge's language, in the subtle contradictions that piled up one after the other, is a far more troubling truth. This wasn't just about inconsistencies. It was about the way certain facts shifted depending on who was asking the question. It was about the things Harry claimed not to know, that he'd previously spoken about at length. It was about memory, about intent, about motive. And whether the story he told in that witness box was truly the truth, or something else entirely. Let's pause here. Have you ever watched someone talk themselves into a corner? Not with malice, not with evil intent, but with that quiet, creeping sense that their story is starting to crack, and they can't stop it? Now imagine doing that under oath in front of a judge, while the eyes of the nation and your own family are fixed on you. That's what this case became. And that's where it all turned. Prince Harry's lawsuit against Associated Newspapers, owners of the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday, wasn't just a fight against the press. It was a referendum on his past, on his version of events, on whether the institutions that wounded him, as he claims, should be held to account. He spoke about his ex-girlfriend Chelsea Davy, about the alleged phone tapping, the gossip, the fear, about how the coverage made him feel paranoid, helpless, hunted. He accused the tabloids of manipulating the end of his relationships. He said their reporting pushed him toward drugs and drinking, that they intruded so deeply, so relentlessly, they effectively poisoned his early adult life. Those claims were emotional, raw, painful to hear. But then came the questions. What did he actually know, at the time, about the source of those articles? Did he really have no idea how certain quotes had appeared, almost verbatim, in newsprint? Did he forget the emails, the phone calls? And when he denied those details under oath, when he insisted, firmly, that he had never, not once leaked or authorized anyone to leak, something didn't quite line up. It's hard to explain the exact moment the judge's tone shifted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam a gavel. But his wording? It sharpened. Phrases like internal inconsistency began appearing in the judgment. Then credibility of testimony. Then that damning phrase. The potential for perjury. Because here's what's chilling. The contradictions weren't just casual. They weren't footnotes. They were central to the case. Harry testified that he only learned about specific leaks and alleged illegal activity years later, sometimes after court proceedings had already begun. But documents submitted by his own team, emails, call logs, old diary entries, suggest otherwise. In one striking example, he claimed not to recall any knowledge of a friend speaking to a reporter. Then, a 2006 email surfaces, one where Harry not only acknowledges the quote, but jokes about it. Now pause. You might think, sure, memory fades. People forget. But courts don't deal in feelings. They deal in facts. And when facts collide with sworn testimony, something has to give. The judge didn't call Harry a liar. Not directly. But he did something far worse, in a way. He laid out a paper trail, and he left the implications to hang, unspoken, but unavoidable. Which brings us back to that moment. The silence after the verdict. The brief flicker in Harry's eyes, a mix of disbelief, fear, maybe even betrayal. The oxygen seemed to leave the room. And here's what few people know. The judge didn't need to refer Harry to the Crown Prosecution Service. He could have let it slide. Many do. But he chose to. Not as punishment. Not as spectacle. But because. And this is key. He believed the inconsistencies were intentional enough to warrant further review. That's a chilling threshold to cross. Because a CPS referral isn't just a warning. It's a door. Once opened, it invites prosecutors in. It begins a process that may end in nothing or in criminal charges. And for a member of the royal family, that's uncharted territory. Now let's be clear. This doesn't mean Harry will be arrested. It doesn't mean he'll be charged. Not yet. But it does mean something far more fragile has been broken. Trust. Trust between Harry and the judiciary. Trust between Harry and the public. And perhaps, most heartbreakingly of all, trust between Harry and the story he's been telling for years. Because when a man takes the stand and tells the world he's been hunted, harassed, vilified, we want to believe him. We want to believe the victim. But when that same man is accused of manipulating the facts, of rewriting his victimhood to gain leverage, we're left in a moral freefall. What's true? What isn't? And more urgently, what was the real cost? Because Meghan wasn't there that day. And while Harry spoke about protecting her, about how the press had made her life a misery, about how this trial was for her, too, something felt absent. Like she'd already stepped back, already recalibrated, already seen where this was going before the gavel fell. There's a story there too. But we'll get to it. Because over the next several chapters, we're going to break down everything. The trial, the testimony, the perjury referral, the media coverage, the palace silence, and the quiet rumblings at the CPS. We're going to look at what Harry said and what he didn't, what the judge wrote and what he implied. And we're going to try, carefully, to answer the question now echoing across courtrooms, newsrooms, and palace walls alike. Did Prince Harry lie under oath? And if so, was it the end of his truth? Or just the beginning of something far more dangerous? Because what comes next isn't just legal. It's existential. And as one court official muttered as Harry was led quietly out a side door, head low, eyes wet, lips tight. He doesn't look like someone who just lost a lawsuit. He looks like someone who knows what's coming. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. You ever notice when a room shifts? Not loudly, not with chaos, but in that quiet, almost imperceptible way, like the temperature drops, like something just changed, but you can't quite name it. That's what happened in courtroom 3 the moment Prince Harry finished his final words. It wasn't dramatic. No gavel slammed. No shouting across the aisle. No objections. Just stillness. And then something even stranger. His own lawyer sat back. Didn't speak. Didn't interject. Didn't challenge the subtle but growing tension in the judge's face. And that's when you realize something important. Sometimes the most telling moment in a courtroom isn't what's said, it's what's not done. Why didn't his lawyer move to clarify that last statement? Why didn't he interrupt when the judge leaned forward and pressed about the timeline? Why did the defense team suddenly go still? Let me walk you through it. It was the last day of testimony. A day Harry's team had prepped for exhaustively. This was meant to be the emotional close. The prince's final strike against a press empire he blamed for more than just headlines. This was his moment to stand firm, to finish what he started. But something fell off even before he took the stand. He looked drawn, not just tired, not just serious. We're talking a kind of hollow tension, like a man trying to brace himself for a blow he already suspects is coming. He clutched a stack of notes. Didn't glance at them once. Instead, when the judge asked for clarification, again, on how certain information had entered the public record in 2005, Harry paused. Too long. Not long enough to signal deep reflection, but long enough for everyone in the room to start writing in their notebooks. He said, I was unaware of that detail at the time. Then looked up, and for a half second, maybe less, he flicked his eyes toward his attorney. Not for support, for confirmation. It's subtle. But in court, everything matters. And here's the thing. That exact statement contradicted not just earlier testimony from Harry, but a letter submitted earlier in the week. A letter Harry himself had written, dated, signed. A letter that acknowledged the very detail he claimed to have been unaware of. Now you might be thinking, all right, maybe he forgot. It's possible. But this letter? It wasn't buried in some archive. It was Exhibit C. His legal team introduced it. And the judge? Oh, he noticed. You could see it. A shift in his brow, a tightening of the jaw. He turned slightly, pulled his glasses down, and asked, Your Highness, would you agree that the letter dated March 17, 2005, submitted as Exhibit C, contains your signature and references the alleged breach you now say you were unaware of at the time? The room was dead silent. Harry hesitated. His voice tightened. I don't recall writing that portion. I'd have to review. But the judge didn't let it hang. It is your letter, is it not? And here it is, the moment the room shifted. Not because of what Harry said, because of what he didn't say. He didn't answer immediately, didn't deny it, didn't assert memory loss. He just looked down. Then, softly, Yes, it is my letter. You could hear the breath catch in someone's throat 2 rows behind me. Not because the letter itself was earth-shattering. It wasn't. But because it contradicted the very foundation of Harry's sworn statement. And worse, it was his own submission. And still, his lawyer didn't speak. Why? Why didn't they try to reframe it? Was this part of some larger strategy? Or had they realized, in real time, that the defense had just handed the prosecution a live grenade? Now, I want to be careful here. It's easy, too easy, to look at courtroom drama and assume guilt. That's not what this is. But you learn something from watching enough trials. When a legal team goes silent, it's not always a strategy. Sometimes it's shock. And this felt like that. Because the moment the judge acknowledged the contradiction, he didn't just move on. He began to probe, gently at first, but persistently. Would you consider this an oversight? Was the memory lapse limited to this incident? And then the big one. Have you knowingly misrepresented any facts in this case, Your Highness? Harry sat back. And here's where the tension broke into something colder, disbelief. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for water. Sipped. His lawyer shifted in his seat, leaned forward, then back. Harry finally answered. No, sir. Absolutely not. His tone was firmer now. But something had already cracked. It was like the ground beneath him had moved, just a little. Not a landslide. Not yet, but enough to throw him off balance. The judge took a note. Brief. Sharp. And again, his eyes didn't leave Harry. Now here's what makes this moment even stranger and more damning, perhaps. Up until that point, the courtroom had been sympathetic. Reporters weren't whispering. The judge had shown courtesy. The public gallery included a few quiet nods when Harry spoke about media abuse, about the misery inflicted on his wife, about the loss of privacy, the paranoia. There was real emotion, even empathy. But once the judge pointed out the contradiction, that delicate balance shifted. Reporters began to lean in. Pens scratched faster. A barrister in the back leaned over to whisper. Urgently, to a colleague. Why? Because once a contradiction enters the official record,